Yeah, before we begin the Q&A, please accept my apologies. In my lack of sleep tiredness, I forgot when I was introducing the speakers, I forgot to mention the title of their speech. So Ms. Sukanya, the title was When the Door Closes, Somewhere a Window Opens. And she shared on the stages of the rituals practiced by the Hindu faith, which is very well, in a way, well designed through years and thousands of years of wisdom, of periods when a person just indulge in the blunt and bare emotions, and then where the village comes in and the social support sort of fill the whole, and then subsequently the person who has just bereft take on a role of giving back. And it was really beautiful, and she ended her talk about that grief and loss need not be a loss of a life, it could be something else, and then there is a lot to explore about that. And then Dr. Neo Han Yi, a very experienced palliative care physician and also who has a lot of research knowledge in ethics and dilemma, shared with us. His title was A Gift of Love, Advanced Directives, where he shared on a very important 3 documents, but the first one was the law that was legislated in 1996, which most of us feel that it's really not very practical. And then the lasting power of attorney, the law that was established in 2008 actually, but it was really more in effect in 2010, the Advanced Medical the Mental Capacity Act. And the last one was Advanced Care Planning. And she shared on 2 very thought-provoking situations that was very clinically very real. I'm sure Dr. Phua Hui Ling, who is also an anesthetist, intensivist on the floor, and also some of the doctors in the room would identify with and perhaps the family of the first case really needed that time for their own grieving period. And then the second story, I was there as well on the last moment of his life that he shared, and then he talked about the 3. And then Inche Nadiputra shared on his experience of situations in his youth where a adopted sister who passed away, but there was a sign of that, and then still come to his mind, and it's a very palpable a lesson about how long can grief last, and it doesn't need to impair a person's life. Look at his accomplishment as a drama artist over the years, and perhaps even grief could have nourished his artistic creativity. And then of course he shared a beautiful poem which unfortunately I couldn't quite appreciate because you really need to listen to it in its language. So there was Inche Nadiputra sharing on some of his wisdom on grief and bereavement. And finally, Dr. William Wan read from his book. His title was Living Well.
Actually,
yes.
Sorry, this is not working, is it?
Yeah, just push, turn it on.
I must push, is it?
Yes, yes.
I thought you will push by itself. I thought everything is automated these days, right? I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to speak about. So after I heard them speaking about grief, I read my book. Because if I were to speak about living well instead of leaving well, it would be actually the wrong topic, because today is all about grieving and leaving, right?
But your title was The Art of Living Well. That's correct.
是吗?
Yes.
Living 还是
Living.
Oh, living.
I didn't pronounce it very
Living
well.
is correct. Yeah, not living. Yeah, living correct. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
The
By the
title of
way-
his
by the
talk
way-
was The Art of Living Well.
Yeah. Yeah. So in fact, it was time up. I was reading the whole book, but the time went up. So anyway, yeah. Thanks.
But it was very apt. I mean, you shared about how it's so inappropriate to just say anything. I mean, if you don't know what to say, then just be present. And that was a very important message that was loud and clear. So thank you very much, Dr. Wan. And YE, I must, kudos to you for really taking action after the research. I mean, a lot of us done a lot of research, did a lot of things, but and we always leave it to somebody else to start something. And thanks for starting this Grief Matters. And now that I know it, I'll be sharing with all my team in South Foundation that this is an important thing. I mean, and the research is so interesting. Your interviews of so many people, and then I'm learning all the time. As you're relating your data and the findings, I was like, oh, this I could have known this, and I would have done something even better. And so I would like to hear more from you later.
Actually, we can jump into, if you don't mind.
Yes,
Actually,
sure.
you didn't do any research. You didn't do any research because what you did was you went to search and then you went to set up. Then the rest are doing research. I mean, they research and then they search again and they search again. They never do anything. So yours is not research.
So I have something to say. I actually started this about telling you how much I lose my sleep because I've been helping a friend in the last 2 days or so through his wake and funeral. And then I'm experiencing firsthand this phenomenon called vicarious traumatization. So sometimes when you're so empathetic, being so present, right, you actually sort of feel it, and then I'm actually grieving. But I wasn't very focused. I was sleeping, and then I woke up, and then I felt that, oh, I forgot about this. I have to come over here. And last minute, while people are speaking, I was reading what am I supposed to do. And then in order to be focused, I have to summarize what everybody speaks. So I beg your pardon for indulging me in just doing this to cope with this vicarious traumatic experience. So so it was really very interesting. We're talking about this grief and loss issue, and I was going through this the last 3 days, took leave to stay with this friend, and then tomorrow I'm also talking about it in the other conference organized by NAG on grief and bereavement. So it's grief and bereavement overload, and today is the 10th of 10 is the birthday of my father who passed away 2004, and so it's very interesting. So perhaps now, with me just summarizing, I have a purpose in this. My intention is perhaps by going through this, it could sort of provoke some thoughts and questions. And at this point, I'd like to open the Q&A session to the floor. So if anybody would have any questions or comments to YE, the social worker, a very senior social worker from Singapore Hospice Council, who is now setting up this center in Montfort Care, and any of the panelists on the stage. So anybody, please.
Can I make a comment that I
Yes.
didn't get to? But while I was listening to everyone, I was thinking, one of the places where one can get a lot of support before or during and after. I've been watching, my parents-in-law have been living here with me for the last 5 years, and both of them are in their 80s, and they came from India because they needed our kind of presence, and it was easier to have them here. And it was a bit of a separation from everything they had known. But very interestingly, both my parents-in-law and my mother-in-law is here right now, that both of them found new reasons to be active and alive in the sort of the most fulfilling way one can imagine, and finding new setup, new friendships. And what is happening is that every day when they're going out, they're collecting all of the people, their peer group, 10, 15, 20 years range. And my mother-in-law is 83, and her youngest friend is 60. What they're doing there is what in India we don't really have, grief counseling or life counseling. And I think that this is really such an amazing social sort of a community help center. When they're going out for the evening walks, they're sitting down, and there is this one person who just lost her husband, but had a very full life before, and was finding it difficult to get back into her routine. And all her girlfriends, the 70, 80 somethings, are telling her, no, 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 you must go back to your dancing and your music. And she says, okay. And she goes back, and then she recovers from her bereavement and is living a fairly good life quickly after her loss. And in the same group, there is a lady who lost her husband around the same time and is just not being able to cope with it yet. She comes down every single day to sit with them and share her thoughts. And even though she's not moving on, but then we have already heard here, this grief takes its own time, then this not moving on should not be worrisome. That the fact that she comes down and she shares what's going on with her and what she feels and what she's trying to cope with, and the kind of encouragement, support, life wisdom that people have got. So the ones who are older than her, talking to her. And I was thinking, wow, we may not need all kinds of like sort of more serious therapists if our communities could have more of these kind of gatherings. The same thing with my father-in-law. He's meeting people who are 20 years younger than him, who are smartphone savvy, and suddenly my 87-year-old father-in-law is like super smart on the phone, and his brain is working faster than it did 20 years ago, working better and nicer. And I'm thinking, wow, this is what you need for living well, aging wisely, aging well. And so I'm learning every day while they're going through and doing their own thing that, wow, I think there are things that we can incorporate just from watching the kind of impact one can have.
Yes, yes.
And how we can live. So I just wanted to add that because that was one of my points that I wanted to make, that everyone has said the community is important. And the community is important all the time, not just when you're grieving.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes, Wai, please.
This is so beautiful when I hear what you have just said, yeah. And I really think what you have started in that small little group to support the other ladies is such an important anchor in the community for people who are experiencing losses. It's really beautiful. And I want to also share why this Grief Matters, this center that we started, is a little different from what people imagine it to be. A lot of people think that when you are bereaved and you need help, you go for grief counseling. Yeah. So my center has always been misunderstood as a counseling center. Yeah. But in bereavement, we not only need to attend to our emotions. Yeah. In grief, there are many different ways grief can manifest. So the grief reactions can come in the form of our psychological, emotional well-being, in our body, physiological kind of reactions, in behavior, in thoughts, so many different ways. And this is probably the first bereavement center, yeah, if I can indulge, yes. Not only in Singapore, but also in the way it was conceptualized. We want to see people, we want to be able to empower the community to support one another. As what you have beautifully put it, yeah, community coming in. So our job is not really to provide counseling. I really hope I don't have to see people with very prolonged, grief reactions. And if they need to, yes, there must be someone there for them, the professionals. But otherwise, it's about encouraging a lot of such self-help effort. Yeah, and in order to do better self-help, then we all have to learn how to do that. Yeah, I think Dr. William Wan has given a very good summary of some of those possibilities. Yeah, I'm also very intrigued by what you have just shared about the Indian tradition, yeah, and how people are allowed to just not do anything for the first few days in order to come to terms with the loss. Yeah, my husband is Sri Lankan. When my father-in-law passed away, I experienced the entire funeral and their wake very differently from the Chinese culture. Yeah, actually, I had a culture shock. I was shocked because they are so open with death. Yeah, I was assigned the role, because I'm a foreign daughter-in-law, right? I was assigned the role of a photographer, videographer. I was like, oh gosh, in funerals in Singapore, we don't take a camera around and snap pictures of the body, right? But that was my job. Yeah, I was asked to do that. Yeah, and the whole family didn't have to cook. The whole family didn't have to do anything. The villagers came over. The distant relatives came over. They took care of us for the few days. Yeah, and I see how being indulged in that way was so helpful for us as we were grieving. And at the time when my father-in-law, we have to build this pyre and to light the fire, the immediate family members were not allowed to light that pile of woods. It has to be a distant relative to do that on behalf of the grieving family. And there was that kind of support there that I didn't experience in my own tradition. Yeah, and I was pretty impressed by how this actually helps in the whole process of grieving. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Wai and Sukanya. You actually emphasized the importance of community, and just incidentally, we did a survey in Whampoa area. Social isolation rate, 53%. So I'm going to just come back to this topic. I'm very interested to hear from Encik Nadiputra. Being an artist, a dramatist, whether does art, do you think, does it play a role in your dealing with grief and loss, and has it helped, or is it just something of a profession of yours? And yeah.
Okay, I heard what you said just now, right? You don't talk about life and death, right? But in yeah? We do. You do. Okay. Life and death we talk about. Okay. Other things we don't. Okay, but every day, almost every day, in the sermon, in the mosque, we talk about life and death. We emphasize about how to approach death, and we practice that within 24 hours, we have to prepare for the burial. We don't keep it so long. That sometimes poses a problem because when some relatives are away, they have to come back within the 24 hours. And we also, the religion also allows not to bring back the body if someone passed away, let's say, away from Singapore. They can have the burial, let's say, in America, in Japan, whatever. So you don't have to rush back the body to Singapore. It can be done there. Because the sooner the body has been sent for burial, so much the better, within 24 hours. And in my drama also, I did emphasize certain topics about death, and I find it quite sensitive because the things that I just said just now about trying to not to be hasty, not to be so the relative want to bring back, wants to see this, want to see that, want to have prayers at home. But religion does not, our Muslim religion does not make them difficult, because there are ways to settle things in a very easy manner. But why don't you practice it? Because it is costly to bring back your body to Singapore. It is costly. It is time. It's a problem also to do certain arrangement, whether it is politically, whether it is on papers, or all those red tapes, because we believe that the sooner we settle things for the deceased, the better. And there's always prayers offered wherever you are. So there's no problem about. These are the things that I raise up in my theatre, because they always believe that, oh, that's my family, that's my brother, that's my mother, we must bring them back, we must see them. But they forgot that religion does not make them, put them into difficulties. The sooner things are done, the better. So these are the things that sometimes emotionally, anger makes them feel that because of their loved one, all these things come to mind. They've gone crazy. Why can't I be with them? Why can't you bring back them to our homeland? All these things are emotionally stuck in the mind. And that's what I said in the earlier part about the narration, that patience is the key word. And also understanding is the key word. I think every religion does not make things difficult for whoever you are. Things are made easy. But we are the one who are making it difficult for religion, not the other way around. That's the thing.
Thank you very much. I also, there's a question from the floor. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. As expected, Singaporeans really don't ask questions. So as the organizer, I'll ask this question, which is very obvious, because I invited them having all four religion background that you can see. Although Ms. Sukanya says that she's not practicing in the temple, but she's highly influenced by the Hinduism culture. So my question is, since it's World Mental Health Day and it's about separation, so I'd like to ask this question as to how each religion builds up your mental resilience, that when you have to face separation and you have to grieve, how do you build that mental resilience, and how do you overcome, or do you practice somehow to let it go?
So it looks like a question for all. Let's start with Ms. Sukanya.
Yeah.
Okay, if we are talking about the most natural kind of death, that is old age death, then our culture and because Hinduism is like or kind of a lifestyle, so even non-practicing Hindus kind of fall into that practice because it's the way things are done. And in India, we have this sense that at different stages of life, your life focuses on different things. And one of the things it does when you hit midlife, so maybe in your 40s and 50s, when your children are grown up, you start turning to faith. And you start reading or becoming more philosophical. And all of our texts really talk about life and death very clearly, very gently, lovingly, that this is, the body is just the vehicle, and the soul is eternal. And when you have done your duty of your normal life, then it's time to start peeling away all of those things that come between you and the absoluteness of your soul, because that helps you on your way to the end. Because what is the end is very beautiful. It's a merging with your higher self. And I'm in my late 50s, and I'm also somehow, without having always been very iconoclastic, have suddenly found that the ancient wisdom suits me. There's a lot to learn, and India's ancient wisdom is very wise. There's a lot of wisdom in it, and I'm reading these texts and I'm thinking, wow, this is good practice. I'm in my 50s, I may live for another 20, 30, 40 years, who knows? The way science is going, and we're taking better care of ourselves, then this is how we're building our inner resilience, by sort of learning to turn inwards and finding also what it teaches us is, okay, now your other duties are done, then turn to community service. The idea is to think of your faith, serve the higher soul, look for your inner self, and that process is very good for inner resilience. It gives you, our texts are very wise. They give you tools. They tell you what's the problem in the way we look at the world. Go out and experiment. Does that seem true? If it is true, then here are the tools. Try it. And I was thinking, wow, this is so scientific, and it's helping us build inner resilience. And we can, do this. And so I feel that, like we live also in multi-generational homes. So when we have 2 or 3 generations together, that wisdom gets handed down even if you're not doing your own study,
Thank you very much, Sukanya. We have run out of time, but I would really like to hear Dr. William Wan and Han Yu to talk about this last point about resilience and the faith. But please.
Certainly, resilience and faith has a lot of relationship. I gave a talk at the Singapore Psychiatric or Psychological Medicine Conference recently about resilience and faith. What's the relationship between that? Now, I certainly believe that all of us who have faith, whatever faith you have, that faith should drive us and give us a resilience. In my case, it's very simple as maybe 4 propositions. The first proposition is I believe in God. If I do believe in God sincerely so that there is a God, then my whole life is within His control. And second, if it's time for me to go, then it's time for me to go, and I must be prepared to go. So I talk about death to my family all the time, that, anytime I can go, and I should be ready to go. Third, I believe in heaven. So if there is a heaven, which I believe in, then going from this world to another world is like migration. So in my book, I talk about, migration. I talk about death as an emigration process. So we leave from one place to another place. Now, if that place, according to my faith, is a better place, then what am I worried about? I'm going to a better place. So I should be ready to go to a better place. So that's a third proposition. And the fourth proposition is that if I believe that place is a better place, if I believe heaven as a beautiful, most happy place, then I should think about that, freeze that moment of happiness, and bring that back to earth while I'm still living. So I can bring back a little bit of heaven to earth. Then I live the best I can and get ready to leave when I can and when I have to. So, okay lor, I can go. 沒問題.
Han Yu, yeah.
I think this topic about resilience in the face of grief and separation is a very important one. I think it's already mentioned in the Buddhist part by Ms. Ng Wei Chin in her opening speech, that when we talk about resilience, it's always like, priming up, you need a lot of strength, you have to go against something. But in truth, I personally feel that a spiritual form of resilience comes from a great sense of open-heartedness, a great sense of space and acceptance that death is inevitable and part of nature. So in the Buddhist practice, there's a practice of the recollection of death. So literally, the Buddhists will keep thinking every day, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. It sounds extremely morbid, right? But when I reflect on my occupation as a doctor, as a palliative care physician, I reflect on death every day. And that makes an impact because we accept that death is something that's natural. It will come. You don't want it, but it will come. And it makes you think about what's important in your life. The nitty-gritty chicken and duck thing, let it go. In the face of life and death, what's most important, you value and you prioritize and you put your effort into it. It makes you restructure your life and think about what's important. And often when you distill down to what is important, it's actually that spiritual goodness and wellness that everyone here wants to strive towards, a quality of goodness and wholesomeness that will keep us happy and well, but also, leave as a legacy for our children. I'll just recount a story to end it. I hope it's a beautiful one. I had a 90-year-old patient whom I saw for about 8 years from the start of my geriatrics training, geriatrics meaning old people medicine, all the way until she transited to my palliative care training. So I literally saw her die. You know, she was a lovely lady. If I were to just recount, her husband passed away at a very young age. She had 11 children, 3 of whom she adopted because people couldn't keep their children alive at that age and at that time. They gave the children for her to adopt. And she adopted it readily despite all the limitations she had. And she had 11 children. Every time she comes to the consult room, she tells me, I've got 11 children, I've got 20 over grandchildren, and I've got 4 great-grandchildren, and I got 2 great-great, I can't count the generation, you know. And what strikes home every time is that when he comes to see me in the clinic, she'll always bring along a little something. Not that I want it, you know, but it's something that she shows appreciation for. She shows it to anyone, the doctor, the relative, the children, a dog. She'll do it. And when the family members recounted who she was as a person, they recounted her goodness, her sense of generosity, her sense of giving, and her common trait of tongue that she would say that no matter what, just give, just do good, you'll be okay. And that became a legacy for the children to remember as a heritage. And year after year, during her anniversary, they'll recount. They'll come together, the whole big bunch of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, they'll all come together, 4 generations together, and they'll recount her virtues. I just attended her 3rd year anniversary. It was a semi-Taoist Buddhist one. They have a huge palace to burn. But what came across was that same quality of unity, cohesion, goodness that she passed from one generation to another. And I thought that is the quality, that is the gift that we should have for our children. The openness that death will come to all, and that we should always cultivate goodness from one generation to the other.
Thank you very much for the beautiful sharing. Yes.
We still have 2 performance programs. I know most of you are tired. We have a long day. The 2 items, one will be performed by Mr. Nadiputra, a reciter of Christina Rossetti poem called Song. And then I have 2 friends, 2 young friends, Chi Chen Xin and Wong Shen Wei. They will also perform a song. But before we do that, this is apparently very Singapore, and also that everybody has somebody or something happening that concerns with wake, separation, and all these things. And the whole motivation is not just the mental resilience, it's that we need to start building compassion in our society. So, well, let's play the music, and Mr. Nadiputra, you can recite that.